Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up Talladega, the big super speedway, but some surprises. MotoGP, Marquez on the top step, but not Marquez. World Rally Championship and Grid Ranking, week number 4. I'm Joe Samniego. With me, we have Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight and Tanner Smith, editor from pitboxpress.com. A big thank you to all our Patreon investors, Colin, Michelle, Marc, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Link in the video description. Help us pay the bills, get to the racetrack. Buy me a coffee, YouTube Super Chat, welcomed right here on YouTube. And of course, you can do super thanks. And the simplest way to support us, visit our website, gridnetworktv.com. I know Matthew Bro's working on his Talladega recap, plus, of course, all the latest video clips from our YouTube channel. And Tanner, I gotta say, Talladega Super Speedway, we talked about it yesterday. What kind of race are we going to have? Are we going to have something that leaves a bitter taste in everyone's mouth, or something that I feel what some would say more cleaner racing, but still some of the challenges? I saw this as a tale of two races. That first half, fuel saving, 3 or 4 wide, really no surprises. The second half of the race, though, this is when the manufacturer was showing what they wanted to do, work with each other. 5 Toyotas pulled to that bottom lane. They started pulling away. They could not be passed. Logano tried so hard to make that outside groove work. It did, but then the green flag pit stops. That shuffled everything. The Toyotas have to come in first. A little bit of a longer pit stop. It's just amazing. We're talking about 4 seconds of fuel compared to the other drivers that stopped much later. We're able to get out front. Toyota's the big losers. Ford Chevrolet up front. White flag comes out. Before you know it, the checker flag, not the caution flag, the checker flag. Photo finish. Austin Cindric just noses ahead of Ryan Preece. Pretty close finish. Caution free the entire third stage, and no big one. The biggest crash really was the one involving Keselowski, Kyle Busch, and Ryan Blaney in stage 1. Tanner, how refreshing was this race for Talladega, especially the no cautions in the third to final stage and the hard racing we saw?
I definitely feel like the caution-free finish to the race is certainly a bright spot in this event, but I think it's important to remember that we dissect how the finish was so clean and refreshing. And unfortunately, it's because of the next-gen car gridlocking every car in the top 20 into 2 rows and not allowing anybody to pass or create a third lane. So while it was definitely refreshing to see the drivers, act like they have their heads screwed on for most of the race, there was definitely almost an impending doom factor, and it wasn't for the big one this time. It was for, okay, well, who's going to cycle out front at the end of this pit cycle, because those 2 cars are going to be the ones that pretty much control the end of this race. And credit to Ryan Preece, he tried to make something happen, but unfortunately he fell just short to Austin Cindric, who, after so many Talladega, Daytona disappointments, Cindric finally comes around and actually gets to finish one of these races and on all 4 wheels and finishing first. So definitely a bright spot for the sport that we had a clean finish and not, a caution pretty much coming to the checkered flag like we did last spring. So I was definitely happy with how this race played out. As I kind of expressed yesterday, I didn't really love all the controversy that stemmed from, throwing the caution when we did on the final lap. And just in general, I don't think anybody really wants to see a bunch of wadded up equipment. So today was definitely a step in the right direction in that regard, but it would be great to see drivers be able to kind of determine their own destiny a little bit more, rather than this becoming like F1, which is a pit stop race, which is practically what it became towards the end of the event.
Definitely the improvements of, we had the racing where we didn't have the crazy cautions at the end. We didn't have drivers making, for the most part, reckless moves that could have caused a big crash. I know there's one driver we'll talk about later on. Overall, I really enjoyed, particularly when we saw the Toyotas get single file started pulling away. Then I started wondering what's going to happen with this round of pit stops. Can they get far enough? I gotta say, big shout out to Carson Hocevar's crew. How quickly they got from the back of the pack to ahead of the Toyota pack, stay up there. Man,
I
kudos
said
to
he was
that
one to
team.
watch.
One to
Remember?
watch.
Yeah, I said
And
he was one to watch last night. So glad that kind of paid off.
coming in clutch, and that pit crew even had a member hit earlier in the race by Josh Berry. So kudos to that team for making that work. Overall, I was impressed, happy with the racing product we have. Still room for improvement, of course, because it was interesting trying to see Joey Logano try to make that second groove work, but it just couldn't make it. I know we don't have what we used to have as well, where that freight train effect, they just go ride the wall essentially, and nobody can make that inside lane work unless you had a super fast car. So I feel like steps in the right direction. I think the racing product's good, especially considering the last 3 race weekends where we were wondering, like, okay, what's going on with this car, the short tracks, Darlington. This one, I feel like, okay, people are overall pretty happy with the way the race went. You don't have a bunch of cars wadded up, as you said. I think that's a big relief, especially for all the owners in their checkbook. I feel pretty good, but now we're going to Texas Motor Speedway next race weekend. That's going to be something else we're going to have to talk about next weekend. Texas Motor Speedway, one driver. I'm really curious to see how he's going to do next weekend, but he's feeling good. He's in the playoffs. Austin Cindric grabbing that win. He just edged out Ryan Preece, and I know Ryan Preece would have been a hugely popular win. Still for Austin Cindric, very early in his career, still collecting wins here and there. I think still pretty popular win. He joins Josh Berry as the only other Ford driver to win this year, which I just find fascinating. But the other thing, this is his first top 5 finish of the year for Austin Cindric. Only the third time he had a top 10 finish this year, counting the win. Do you see this win potentially allowing Austin Cindric, that 2 team, to build momentum and start having better finishes going out?
I certainly think it's possible, and this kind of feels like part of Cindric's gradual progression to being a cup level star. And more so what I mean by that is he, obviously lit the stage on fire by winning the Daytona 500 and only his 8th start in the series back in 2022. But after that, he really wasn't all that remarkable, which, isn't a knock against him. It was more so, in my opinion, having to do with the Ford Mustang of the time. And I feel like that rough sophomore season in 2023 helped him, kind of regroup and kind of reassess where he needed to strengthen his game. And ultimately, he came into last season, looked very strong, especially at the super speedway tracks, and showed a lot of strength, particularly at Gateway prior to passing his teammate who had run out of fuel on the final lap and gaining that second victory of his career. And it's important to remember that Austin Cindric, to this point, has not, despite his inexperience, has not been knocked out in the round of 16. And he's made 2 playoff appearances, 2022 and 2024, where he had a pretty solid shot to make it forward in the playoffs. And for one reason or another, we can point to this particular track last year as a pretty glaring example of why he didn't make it to the round of 8 last year. I just think that Austin Cindric has slowly but surely been maturing behind the scenes as a race car driver. Now, granted, he has had some dust ups already this year. Ty Dillon at Coda. I think he dumped somebody somewhere else, and I can't quite remember. It must have been Martinsville, but regardless, he has had some run-ins this year that kind of make you question, like, hey, what are you doing? But races like today kind of reinforce why this guy is an Xfinity Series champion, a Daytona 500 champion, and, obviously worthy of taking the number 2 car in this sport. He has a very dedicated team behind him. He clearly works really hard at his craft, and it's great to see him, kind of start to put the pieces together. Now, I still need to see him have a bit more speed at intermediate tracks, which, if you remember from his Xfinity Series career, it did take him a little while to get up to speed at those tracks. So it doesn't really surprise me in the Cup Series that with a completely different platform, we're having a similar issue with him. But if he can start putting himself in better position to win at road courses and at super speedways and at all the intermediate and short tracks, then I think he can really start to put himself amongst the top drivers of the sport. But I still need to see him win more than one race in a season before I really start to, get some confidence in him. But there are 17 more races to go before the regular season ends. 16, pardon me. There's 16 more races before the regular season ends, and I'm sure that Austin and the 2 team will craft something together throughout the regular season to perhaps put themselves back in victory lane yet again.
I do see the potential in Austin Cindric getting a win this year after Talladega. It's just a matter of putting it all together. You have to have a good qualifying effort, start up front, have a good solid race with clean pit stops, making no mistakes. Because we know the Fords, they are fast this year. It just, luck just does not seem to be on a lot of the Ford driver's side. I just don't understand it, Tanner. Joey Logano got his first top 5 today at Talladega. Would have not predicted his first top 5 was going to come in 10 races later in the season. So it's just something else seeing what's going on with these Ford drivers. Josh Berry, even though his results don't show it, he is up towards the front almost every weekend. Just, again, bad luck. The pit stops, mistakes here and there. I think Austin Cindric is at that level, and it's just a matter of putting it all together. Just like what Josh Berry did at Las Vegas and what Austin Cindric did today, keeping it clean. One defining moment, I think, of this race that really helped out the Fords and Chevrolets, though, was when Toyota made that first group of cars stop it in the third stage.
Yep.
Then it came out. Then you had the second group of some Chevrolets. Then you had the third group, some more Chevrolets. Fords were in both groups, essentially. Here comes the Toyotas with the momentum. Carson Hocevar leading the pack. He just somehow managed to squeeze his way around Ross Chastain, but Denny Hamlin could not. That momentum just vanished. Before you know it, Toyota, for a long time, they were not in the top 20. Somehow Bubba Wallace got into the top 10 by the time the race ended, but that just killed Toyota's momentum and chances of winning. It's all because Ross Chastain made that such aggressive move of putting his car essentially in a spot where Denny Hamlin had to either slow down a lot or plow into him and potentially cause a big crash. Was Chastain's move, in your opinion, fair game or too risky? Potentially even something NASCAR should say, you shouldn't be doing this.
So I think it would behoove us to remember that this is not the first time that Ross Chastain has done this particular maneuver, not just at any racetrack, at Talladega in particular. Now, in the 2022 spring race that he eventually went on to win, he and Michael McDowell both sped on pit road during the first green flag pit stops. As a result, they devised this plan when the lead pack got to them, where they would make sure that they kind of blocked the track, strategically speaking, and made it to where the entire lead pack had to basically get on the binders to make sure they didn't completely plow them over. And it was roundly knocked down at the time by everybody at the track and on social media at the time in 2022 that maneuver was dangerous and stupid. And at least in that instance, you could defend what Ross did because it led to something positive for him. Obviously, he ended up staying on the lead lap. He ended up getting back on the lead, or not staying on the lead lap, but he ended up getting his lap back, whether it be by getting the lucky dog or staying on the lead lap as in front of the pack. And it ultimately led to him winning the race. Today, Ross was by himself, no one else around him, putting around 15 miles an hour slower than everybody else with 18 laps to go. The commentators made sure to let us know that the Toyota pack of about 7 or 8 cars that also included a mixture of the Spire Motorsports entries that are Chevy powered, obviously. They were running the same speed as the main pack. So I saw them go into turn 3, and I just had a feeling that Ross was about to do something stupid yet again. But this time I'm just confused, because what did he gain from doing what he did? Like, what you are asking for when you put the rest of the field in a situation like that is one of two things. You are asking them to slow down for you or run you over. And frankly, I think for Ross Chastain's benefit, it almost would have benefited him had somebody just ran him over and crashed him, because he needs to not do that. I get so sick of drivers kind of exploiting certain things to, at the detriment of the rest of the competition. Obviously we're all for ingenuity in the NASCAR Cup Series and beyond, but this is what we would call a cheap trick. And frankly, I am running out of patience with Ross Chastain and his cheap tricks. So it was disappointing. It was reckless. It was stupid. And that's just what Ross Chastain's brand seems to be. And I thought that we had kind of moved away from that era of Ross Chastain, and apparently we are still there now. So I would be very surprised if anyone cuts him a break, especially a Toyota, going forward. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if at Texas on a late restart, if Denny Hamlin got beside him, if he would make it out of the corner, to be completely honest with you. So, yeah, frankly, it was very disappointing to see that move. But, and especially, again, there was no benefit to him making that move other than to have caused a crash to bunch the field back up. So, yeah, it just seemed like reckless without a cause. And I think that was my biggest issue with it, was you're not going to benefit from doing this. You're just making everything more difficult for no apparent reason. So if Ross Chastain finds himself in a wall in the next few weeks, you will probably know why.
And that's the thing. I sort of don't understand why Ross had to make this move. I know some people are going to say, well, he would have gotten passed by much more Toyotas if he didn't break their momentum. That's potentially true, but at the same time, long term, this is not good. Denny Hamlin, as he said, could easily just not give him a break the next race weekend. We know the history does too.
Might I add that, he might get passed by all the Toyotas, as if that's a rational excuse. It didn't improve his result at all. In fact, he finished 22nd right in front of Denny. So that particular move just stalled both of them out for the rest of the race. That's all it accomplished.
Yeah, it didn't really help him at all. It just sort of secured both of their faith and essentially where they finish. But going forward, especially the next time at Talladega, I've sort of seen, in my opinion, how blocking had become something where it used to be, okay, you see aggressive block towards the end of the race, and now it's just almost anticipate you got to go from the high line to the low line block. I know there's that old saying Keselowski's sort of made of, you block me the second time, I'm just going to wreck you, which I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of this move. I don't want to see if somebody tries to copycat Ross Chastain's move at doing this, and then Ross Chastain being the person who's like, I'm not lifting, and you got a big wreck. And that's something I think is just not healthy and something NASCAR would prefer not to have happen. I mean, overall, thankfully there was no crash, but I just feel like when it comes to Ross Chastain, he just makes these moves where I just wonder, is this really going to help you build trust in the garage with your fellow drivers? I know this is not the NASCAR of the 1990s where, everyone sort of know the respect in the garage. The racing was different. This is a little bit more intense. Jobs are on the line, much more frequent, but you're just not making it easier for yourself. Ross Chastain, we're glad we didn't have a caution, a big one. I feel like that could have thrown the race easily into overtime and multiple cautions. That first caution, though, really, if it didn't occur during the green flag pit stop, we probably wouldn't have that following caution with Bell and Buescher. That was, of course, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, and Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch got together trying to make that pit stop. Ryan Blaney, wrong place, wrong time, gets crashed into the mess. So while it's disappointing for Ryan Blaney, I feel this was very devastating for Brad Keselowski. That 6 team has had nothing this year to show when it comes to progress being made on the track. Keselowski still has no top 10 finishes out of the 10 races now. 7 races of 30th or worse. That's just insane. And this is a track where he's won several times, so he had this date circled, and to have it end so early, lap 43, I believe. Do you see Keselowski finding himself in a situation where, considering how bad his season is, he's putting himself in a must-win situation before the regular season ends?
I think that's entirely possible, but I still think it's too early to tell. In fact, they mentioned on the broadcast that 4 races ago, Ty Gibbs was 34th in points, and he's in eyeshot now of making the playoffs. So I wouldn't say it's, I wouldn't say it's something that's necessary to go out and win just yet, but he's not competing for stage points. He isn't even finishing races in a lot of these cases. He just doesn't have any natural speed at any type of facility to this point. So, yeah, I mean, the logical part of my brain says that he shouldn't be thinking about a must win yet, but, and, especially with the speed that his teammates have had. I mean, Chris Buescher was on the front row for a restart and unfortunately didn't stay there because of somebody else's actions, but Ryan Preece finished second today. Like, the RFK stable is very strong, very stout this weekend, and it's really unfortunate they don't get to come away with a win, but not only that, two torn up race cars. So I definitely don't think that they should sound the alarms just yet on the 6 camp, but I mean, they haven't shown speed anywhere. This was probably their best opportunity before Daytona to win a race. And I don't really know where they went wrong. Like, I figured with Jeremy Bullins joining the team, a familiar voice in the headset for Brad Keselowski, that they would have a bit more of a continuation of last year where they had a pretty strong start to middle of the season and kind of fell off towards the playoffs. I kind of felt that they would have a similar season to that, but they've just not been fast anywhere. They don't really have any strong efforts to really point to. And yeah, it's starting to get scary for the 6 crew. So before I move on to our next question, I just want to make one thing clear. There is not a single other person to blame in that first accident than Brad Keselowski. Why are you trying to brake on the racing surface that close to the pit lane and expect that to work out for you? you're almost 40 years old and have been in the sport at this level for 15 years. You know better than to do that. So I don't want to hear anything from anybody blaming that on anybody else. What were you doing? You know better. But we've kind of been having those conversations about bad Brad at these tracks these past couple of years, making dumb mistakes that cause massive accidents. And this is just, unfortunately, another in a long string of that. And one last thing, I did remark to my wife when I saw that Ryan Blaney was in the advanced auto parts car today that, well, is he going to get right reared and put in the wall like he always does with this car at these kinds of tracks? And he did, in fact, get right reared. Thankfully, didn't go head first into the wall today. But yeah, tough day for the Ford camp, but it ended up, tasting pretty sweet for them by the end, I guess. But if you're the 6 crew, you got to find speed and you got to start finding it fast.
You bring up an interesting point about Brad Keselowski, and essentially, his mistake took out a potential winner in Ryan Blaney, who has won a Talladega. Last year, coming to the checker flag, it was Brad Keselowski making contact with Michael McDowell that caused that big crash. Or was that 2 years ago?
That was last spring.
That was last spring.
Yeah, I don't really pin that one on him, though. McDowell made 2 blocks, and as we all know, you can't really do it twice, and you wreck yourself. Bubba Wallace did it the previous spring. So,
and the thing, too, with that one, it looked like it was going to be a Ford victory. It turned out to be a Toyota victory. But today, at least still, Ford got the win. Almost Ryan Preece. Penske took the Ford to victory lane, but yeah, some of the stuff on the super speedways for Brad Keselowski has just not been that great. And that team, I just don't have the confidence in them. Like, I'm looking at the schedule. We got Texas next weekend. I don't see them being a contender for that one. Kansas, maybe if they have a strong car. We know Buescher almost got the win last year, but I just don't know about him. Then we got Charlotte, Nashville, Michigan, Mexico City, Pocono. Again, None of those.
Maybe Charlotte, because he did have a really strong car last year, but as we've seen, that's not an indication of their speed this year at all. So,
yep,
looking scary.
Then you got Atlanta. Of course, that could be a potential, but it just seems like he gets in these crashes. Then you're down to it: Chicago, Sonoma, Dover, Indianapolis, Iowa, Watkins Glen, Richmond, and Daytona. I feel like they have to start racing for, okay, let's just try to put ourselves in a position where maybe we could sneak out a win, because they could point themselves just, okay, do what Ty Gibbs has done, put together some top 10 finishes, just collect those points instead of have bad luck. But I just don't know. They just do not have the speed. JGR has the speed. RFK jumps in some miss with that team, especially when it's Ryan Preece being your best shot almost each week. Brand new in that team, brand new 60 team. Just fascinating.
I think it's important to remember that the 3 teams that added a chartered car this year have not visited Victory Lane: 2311, RFK Racing, and Trackhouse. So, something to consider.
Oh, yeah. And interesting, I feel, when you look at the expanded teams, Preece is by far doing better than Riley Hurst. Of course, Riley's a rookie. I'll give him that. But Trackhouse and Shane Van Gisbergen, what is going on with that team?
he looked. It's so sad. He in particular, SVG, looked great there for the first little while, but I think there was the green flag pit stop at the end of stage 2, and I'm not sure what happened to Ross on that pit stop, but Suarez missed his stall and sped, and SVG mirrored him by missing his stall and speeding. So, that's just there's something wrong with Trackhouse as a whole right now. And Ross Chastain's 3 straight 7th place finishes before this are definitely kind of like blanketing over some pretty rough stuff for their other cars. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to continue to track that going forward, but it's not looking great for the 3-car teams that just became 3-car teams.
Yeah, not at all. On social media, X, Shane Van Gisbergen posted, we just did not have the speed, the pit road mistake as well, and it was just nothing going for him and the team today. In the chat room, I encourage everyone watching participate in the chat room. It was nice to not have the big one today, and that was really nice. I mean, I know we talked about like when's going to happen. I know we talked about how we sometimes get tired of seeing all the promo ads of Talladega and just crash after crash after crash. It was even, they put up their, they asked Larry McReynolds, oh, what's the trends? And they're just showing all the past big ones. Then they go to a commercial break. So glad we didn't have that big crash. And overall, this race, as I mentioned, that second caution was for Christopher Bell, Chris Buescher on the following restart after Blaney, the other crash. So could have been easily a race with just the stage cautions. Other notables, Michael McDowell, the Xfinity Fastest Lap Award again. I'm convinced he was watching you, Alex and Zach, on that show, the Gay Racing Podcast, and he's just motivated to get all these Fastest Lap Awards.
He definitely saw the clip. It's not a coincidence anymore. There's no way. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, you got to give your hats off to the Spire crew. They can definitely make a fast car for these super speedways if only they can translate it into results.
I mean, what Carson Hocevar's pit crew proved today with that fast stop to get ahead of Toyota's great effort. Ty Gibbs led the most laps. I know we talked about, we don't see him being contender. His race, of course, ruined by Ross Chastain, that strategy. Zane Smith, the pole sitter, he was pushing Joey Logano towards the front before the final round of pit stops. Finished 21st after really a strong day. Plenty of pit
what happened to him. He like coming out of turn 2 on the final lap. I guess he thought a third lane might magically be able to happen. He pulled out of like 8th. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Because he was in my fantasy lineup. I was like, dude, what are you doing? And he ends up outside of the top 20.
Yeah,
it's just poor luck.
Incredibly poor luck. And overall, some of the drivers that Talladega, usually we see surprises up at the front. I wouldn't count Joey Logano getting his first top 5 as a surprise, even though it's surprising to say he got his first top 5 now, 10 races into the season. But Noah Gragson, up there, top 10. What an effort by him. Overall, we know now that cars weren't torn up. Everyone pretty much finished the race except the 4 that got crashed. Everyone has notes to take where to improve the cars, where to improve their strategy, the setup, because we come here for the playoffs at Talladega. What would the teams be taking note of today to improve for the next time we come to Talladega?
Well, I'm not quite sure because earlier this week it came out that NASCAR is basically looking to add some sort of element to, I think it's the left side of the car, that'll essentially try to decrease, the ability of liftoff with the car so they won't flip as easy. So with that kind of throwing a wrench in things, assuming it gets implemented, I'm not sure. But if we're just talking about on the base level, track position, like if you can't get out first through third out of your group, you have no chance of winning that race. It just is what it is. All these guys that, logged 500 miles today, if they were in the 4th row back on the last 15 laps of the race, you're not going to win. And that's pretty defeating, I would imagine, because you kind of just have to sit there or else you're going to finish 28th instead of 8th. So, yeah, I don't really know what you can really glean from this race as far as, on the race team level. Like, obviously, you've got to make sure that you're getting the fuel engaged and getting as much in there as you can in the quick amount of time that you're supposed to be engaged with the car. But, At the same time, if we're talking about the on-track product, it's just you have to be in the first 3 rows to even have a chance towards the end of the race. And if you aren't, then your race is pretty much over and you are going to finish where you are at. And I feel like that's kind of disappointing because I feel like part of the appeal of Talladega and Daytona and Atlanta to a smaller extent is the idea that each driver has the ability to go out and win and kind of will themselves to victory. And this current car just doesn't offer that at all. With, you can't really generate a run. You can't form a third lane because it's a longer trip around the track. So you have to have a little bit more speed up there to actually make it work. And unfortunately, you also have to have other cars come with you in this kind of a race. So yeah, it's a real tough situation for the teams to be in because I don't really think there's much to really glean from this weekend as far as improvements are concerned. I don't think there's like any additional pit road choreography that can be done to make the fuel go in the car faster or any aerodynamic modifications you can make to the next gen car to make it better. But it's disappointing to come out of the race knowing that with 15 to go, there's only going to be really 2, maybe 3 guys that can end up with the victory. And more power to them and their pit crew. They put them in the position to get there, but I definitely think that the appeal of these races is starting to kind of wane now that it's so track position dependent, like practically every other race that we run.
Track position is going to be so important. I think qualifying the Fords, I mean, they had the front row besides Kyle Busch, but they had a lot of Fords up there. One of the things I'm really curious about is how much could Toyota improve? But if they're going to be faster, then you're assuming they might use up more fuel. And of course, that's what happened today. They had to be that first group to stop, and that didn't work out. It really seemed like that last group to stop, especially you had enough cars, you could get out ahead and get a little lucky too if Ross Chastain does a repeat. But overall, I think that's what the crew chiefs, the strategists are going to be looking at is, okay, so the trends of, okay, because again, it's going to be 500 miles when we come back, same length. I assume the exact same stage lengths as well too. Would be nice in NASCAR shorten the first 2 stages so we didn't have fuel mileage runs and a really long third stage. I don't think that's going to happen.
Nope.
So really, I think qualifying, they're going to be looking at where could we get that extra speed to be up front. Just, again, it's going to probably be fuel mileage. Just in that third stage, okay, how do we position ourselves, especially considering we might have 2 or 3 cautions? One thing I found very interesting was how Kyle Larson, after race, said the Fords were just handling so well, he could not get them squarely to try to get a run. I'm curious, what could Chevrolet do? Because clearly they weren't the fastest cars in general. Once they were drafting, they could work their way to the front in the big pack. But, I mean, qualifying, we saw them outside the top 10, besides Kyle Busch. We saw them working towards the front, but they just had nothing to get around the 2 Fords today, Larson and Byron. So I'm really curious to see what the Chevrolets could do to improve them. But I think it's going to be coming down to the strategy. And I think Toyota is really going to try to figure out a creative way. Do they go a little bit off cycle, assuming, okay, if it goes green flag all the way, we don't have to pit again, or we could pit much later. It's going to be fascinating, of course. Plenty of racing ahead before we get to Talladega again right here. And of course, we encourage everyone to subscribe, hit the bell icon. We'll be back on the air Thursday for Texas preview right here on the Grid Network. Now let's go ahead and bring Kobe in because we got to talk about MotoGP, the Spanish Grand Prix. And Kobe, you could say it was a Marquez sweep, but 2 different people did it.
Yeah, two different Marquezes in that case. Once again, Marquez won the sprint race, but for the first time this season, he didn't lead a single lap in the Grand Prix on Sunday. He crashed out early in the race after a poor start in third place, then make contact with his Ducati factory teammate, Pecco Bagnaia. The pole sitter for the race was a big shock, though. It's a name that we talked about during the very early days of Grid Network, but we haven't really talked about him much in the last few years because he's on a bike that traditionally has not been able to keep up with the Ducati, and that is Fabio Quartararo. Yeah, him. We kind of forgot about him, right, Joe? In the Yamaha, led the first few laps. So for the first time, we didn't see everyone chasing Marquez around the circuit at any point on Sunday. Do you think we're getting to the point of the season, the first few race weekends in, is the competition starting to catch up to Marquez and the whole Ducati factory team?
I kept thinking at some point people are going to catch up to the Ducati teams. That factory team can't just be dominant forever. This weekend, coming in, I thought this was going to be all Marc Marquez sweep. That was my pick a winner sweep. But sure enough, we might be seeing something where I think now people are going to say, hey, Marc Marquez is not invisible. He's not untouchable. We could beat him. Fabio Quartararo, we used to talk about him being the grid ranking, leading up to his first championship. And then when he got that pole, it's like, where did that come from? That'd be great to see Yamaha starting to appear again. We then saw Pecco Bagnaia. Great start. Put Marc Marquez in third place. And then Marc Marquez made that mistake, crashes out. This has to feel pretty good if you're everybody else like, look, maybe it's once he's not leading and he knows he's pushing himself too hard, he's still prone to mistakes. That's what happened at Coda when he was leading that race. We got to keep working on this. We could beat him, especially if you're Pecco Bagnaia. I think that's going to be the biggest threat. Yamaha, I will be happy to see if they could continue this at Le Mans in a couple of weeks' time, because that's going to be Fabio Quartararo's home country race. Another podium. That'll be huge for that team to show they're back. Maverick Vinales, he just missed out on the podium. I know the last race he got disqualified. Well, a time penalty because of tire pressure issue. Lost his podium finish, but he's showing something. And what so far I feel has to be a disappointment for KTM, considering they got Pedro Acosta, they got Brad Binder, and just nothing to really show. And then for Aprilia, well, that team, maybe when Martin comes back, maybe they could go for wins, but don't focus on champ. Just go for individual race wins. But I think the competition could catch up, but same time it has to be how often does Marc Marquez make these mistakes?
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about one Marquez. Let's talk about the other Marquez. The winner today at Jerez was actually his brother, Alex Marquez, and it was a special day for Alex because it was his very first career MotoGP win, and it's even better that you get to do it at your home Grand Prix. It's also his first win since the 2019 Moto2 season, so it's been a minute since we've seen Alex Marquez at the top step of a podium in MotoGP. And with the win, he takes the points lead by 1 point over his brother Marquez. And after 5 race weekends down, Alex's worst finish is 6th place in the Qatar Grand Prix, and he's finished second in all 5 sprints up to now, and with 4 podiums in 5 Grand Prix races. So it's been a remarkable start for Alex Marquez, the best start of his MotoGP career, and it's also been a remarkable show of consistency. Do you think it's time for us to look at Alex Marquez and think of him as a serious championship contender this year?
Yes. When he came from Moto2 to MotoGP, I had a little bit of a impression that, okay, let's see what he could do because, he's related to Marc Marquez. Did he get the preferred equipment, the preferred treatment, everything sort of handed him? What could he do? He's always been pretty good, again, point finishes. Now, granted, a point finish in MotoGP is from 15th, of course, up to the win. So you're in the top 15, you're scoring points. He's been able to do that, but it's always been DNFs. That seems to be his weakness. Not to mention, he was with Honda as Honda was going from great to pretty lousy bike that nobody could really be on. He comes to Ducati. Last year was an improvement from the year before, but still a couple DNFs. But now he is just on a new level to where second place, second place. Second place, I feel like this was just okay. When is he going to get that win? And he did it today. And this wasn't just because he started on the pole, dominated, ran away, cakewalk. He had that mistake on lap one where he almost took out Marc Marquez and potentially Pecco Bagnaia. Had to regather it up, come back. Marc Marquez crashed out. He gets around Pecco Bagnaia. He gets around Fabio Quartararo. What a ride for him to get the win. If he could keep this up, and especially the crazy stat, as you mentioned, Kobe, where his worst finish is sixth place. And then all those podium finishes, not to mention the sprint races, where he's just finishing second. The way the point system is in MotoGP, he could get this champion. He could slowly start pulling ahead if he doesn't make mistakes. And I'm starting to believe, I'm becoming a believer, and he has that capability. He has a team to make that happen. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Alex Marquez could do for the rest of the season. If he keeps this up, he is definitely a championship contender up there with Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Marquez.
Yes, it's been amazing to see Alex Marquez. Has kind of gone from someone the last couple of years he's been, kind of like, like 10th, 9th, 8th place rider. And now he's, become one of the main contenders, in each and every MotoGP racing weekend. And looking at Alex Marquez's career, he was the 2019 Moto2 champion. 2020, that was his rookie year in MotoGP. Actually, his first 3 years, he rode for Honda, as you mentioned, Joe. The Honda bike wasn't that great. His rookie year, he was 14th in points. Second year, 16th, and then he was 17th in his third year. So it really got worse for Alex Marquez, as the years went on at Honda. And then 2023 moved over to Ducati, and we finally started to see something from him. In 2023, he was 9th in the points, and then he got one spot better in 2024. Last year, he was the 8th in points, and right now he's the championship points leader. So we're starting to see this slow progression with Alex Marquez, where he started off, the first 3 years, I won't really blame it on him because, the Honda bike was going downhill, so that wasn't necessarily his fault. Then he finally got on a good bike with a decent team, and he's really starting to show what he can do in MotoGP. I'm not sure if he'll ever be able to accomplish what his brother Marc Marquez has accomplished, but it's really nice to see Alex Marquez starting to, fall into his own and create his own legacy here because, before all of this, you really just knew him as Marc Marquez's brother, and I'm sure that's not what he wants to be known as. Now he can build a thing for himself, and we can just call him just Alex Marquez, a great MotoGP rider instead of Marc's little brother. Yeah, so I think it's time that we start, showing him some respect and giving him his due, as one of the title contenders this year in MotoGP. I think it'll be really exciting to see brother versus brother all year long going for this MotoGP World Championship. And we also have another race to talk about. That is the World Rally Championship, who raced in the Canary Islands. And in that race, rally, Kalle Rovanperä returned to the top step of the podium. Sebastian Ogier, Elfyn Evans, and Takamoto Katsuta led a Toyota 1, 2, 3, 4 sweep. Adrian Formo is the first non-Toyota finisher in fifth with Hyundai. Evans extends his points lead over Rovanperä by 43 points. And the next round is in Portugal, where Thierry Neuville, Tonic, and everyone else will be trying to catch up. Joe, can Hyundai break the Toyota win streak that started at Rally Japan last year? And I just want to ask you as well, what is going on with Hyundai?
The Hyundai, they're just not having that good of a season. I mean, I thought it was just, okay, they're getting close. They're going to get the win, but Toyota this weekend just looked unbeatable. And I'm starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, you look at what happened last year at Rally Portugal. Who won that race? Well, Sebastian Ogier, Toyota Gazoo Racing. Who's going to be back in Rally Portugal? Sebastian Ogier with Toyota Racing, of course. I mean, you had Tonic winning the following race in Italy. But I just feel like, okay, this could be a dominant season for Toyota to just claim their team manufacturers championship very early. And for the drivers championship, Elfyn Evans, he could start pulling away a little bit. I just do not see that winning streak ending next round at Rally Portugal. I think you got to look at Ogier, Evans, potentially Rovanperä to try to catch up to Evans in the championship. I like the idea that we have Hyundai there that, they had a defending champion and Thierry Neuville. I think they have the capability of getting the win, but they just don't seem to have. They're missing something. I don't know what it is. I mean, Autonic's a good driver. Thierry Neuville is a great driver. Formo has the potential still and has brought some great results. What is missing there at the Hyundai team? That is something I think Hyundai is going to really start working, because World Rally Championship has the shortest season out of any series in the grid ranking. Before you know it, they're going to run out of time. We're just a couple rounds away from the halfway point of the season, and it looks like it's going to be all Toyota, Kobe.
Yeah, kind of like we like to joke in MotoGP, saying it's the Ducati Cup. It's about to be the Toyota Cup and World Rally Championship. And the thing that I'm wondering about Hyundai, it wouldn't be good for World Rally Championship, but there have been rumors, that within like the next year or two, they could completely pull out of the World Rally Championship, which would be absolutely devastating for this championship to lose a major manufacturer. But Hyundai, they're going to be focused on sports car racing in the coming years, because they're going to have their Genesis brand racing in the World Endurance Championship in the coming year, and then after that, they're going to be in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. So as Hyundai, shifts its focus, towards prototype racing, a lot of people are wondering, like, are those resources, where they had their World Rally Championship, with their World Rally Championship program, all the resources to that, I wonder if that could, if some of that could be going away and more into the sports car racing program. What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Could be potentially that's what's going on behind the scenes, is just as the resources for the sports car program is being worked on, it's sort of inadvertently taking away the attention from the World Rally team. Of course, they're not going to say anything like, oh, we're blatantly giving you a smaller budget or we're taking away those engineers, but it's always could be a potential distraction going on. Hyundai's really trying to expand their racing presence. I mean, they could be potentially that's what's going on, and maybe hopefully that group could reconvene and say, okay, we got to work on this. We got to bring our best effort for World Rally Championship, because they'll love to see potentially more wins. Everybody wants to win, but they need to get him because it hasn't been good. And Thierry Neuville, opportunity to say, hey, if I'm going to be defending my championship, I want to prove I'm still best to beat. You got to beat me week in and week out. You can't say that when you're behind all the Toyotas.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll certainly be keeping an eye on Hyundai throughout the rest of the 2025 World Rally Championship season to see if they can end their dry spell and finally get one over Toyota. And with that said, I believe it's time to see this week's grid ranking.
Yeah, week 4 of the grid ranking is out. And one of the big things, Alex Palou, of course, continues to lead. IndyCar was not running this weekend. We only had NASCAR, MotoGP, World Rally Championship. Marc Marquez dropped out of the top 10 with his crash today. He is behind essentially everyone when it comes to the top 10. One of the big things we saw, Alex Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia, they moved up a little bit with their finishes. However, those three with Marc Marquez, very close to that could change the next race weekend at Le Mans. The big surprise for some, Sebastian Ogier, he did not have 2 starts, but he did today 2 starts. So he's in the grid ranking. Despite being 3rd in the World Rally Championship rating, he is 2nd in the grid ranking because his 2 finishes happened 1st and 2nd. So Kobe, last year Ogier, he added races towards the end of the season when it became clear he could be a potential championship contender. Overall, the way Toyota's running, could we see Ogier add more races and potentially go for that championship in World Rally?
I said, well, looking at the World Rally Championship points at the moment, given the 2 rallies that he missed, it seems like it would be really hard for him to try to win the championship or be in contention for it at the moment, because looking at now, it looks like he's down in 4th, and he has a whole bunch of points that he would need to make up to get there. But never say never. But I'll say in regards to the grid ranking championship, I think maybe it could be in contention, depending on how things go. But it's been incredible to see what Sebastian Ogier is able to do on a part-time level. He's doing something that he did it last year, as you mentioned. But we haven't seen any other driver from any racing series do what he's doing right now, where he can just be a part-timer and end up in the top 10 of the grid ranking and be very competitive. But yeah, if Toyota asked him to do this and if he's interested, it would not surprise me, because Sebastian Ogier, he don't have anything else to prove. He's really just entering these rallies that he wants to just for fun. He's just enjoying life right now since his legacy is already set.
A legacy is set, and a legacy of being a phenomenal part-time racer. Just adding on to that, now as I mentioned, of course, Marc Marquez dropped out of the top 10. There you see him in 12th. Christopher Bell in the top 10 lost ground with his DNF from 18.42 to 16.52, but still finds himself in the top 10 after Talladega. William Byron, he got ahead of Marc Marquez, and a surprise to me, but just the way it goes, Max Verstappen, 15th after all the shuffling today. Colorado Pair with his win moves into the top 20. We know it's not the season Max Verstappen was hoping for in Formula One. But I have to ask you, Tanner, Kobe, when it comes to next weekend, we have Formula One in Miami and IndyCar at Barber Motorsports Park. Alex Palou, top 10, leading the grid ranking. Oscar Piastri, the highest rated F1 driver in the grid ranking, in the top 10. Who's more likely to win the respective race, Alex Palou or Oscar Piastri?
I lean towards Palou because obviously he's won here before. In fact, got his very first career victory here back in 2021, which propelled him to his very first title in that series, his first of now 3, and it's looking very, very, very strong to get a 4th very, very, very shortly. So I think that Palou definitely has a bit of a leg above everybody in IndyCar right now, outside of Kyle Kirkwood at Long Beach 2 weekends ago. But I wouldn't really rule out Piastri. I think that given his performance this season, if he hasn't spun out like he did in the wet at Australia, he has either been ahead of everybody or right behind the leaders. So I definitely don't think Piastri's out of the question by any stretch, but if I had to pick between the two, I think there's a little bit less variance right now in IndyCar about who is strongest, and Alex Palou is clearly King Kong in that series right now.
Yeah, definitely. Calling Alex Palou King Kong is definitely one way to describe how him and the number 10 team have been completely dominating the series. Even on an off day, Alex Palou is still getting a podium finish or just an overall good points day. Honestly, for me, I think it's really hard to determine who's going to win. I think it's like the flip of a coin. But if I had to pick someone, I'm with you, Dan. I'd have to say Alex Palou, probably because he's really good at Barber Motorsports Park. And he's really good at just about any track on the circuit. I know he's still searching for that first oval win, and I think it may potentially come this year, maybe potentially in the biggest race of them all in the month. I may well have to wait and see there, but I certainly see Alex Palou as one of the favorites to win at Barber Motorsports Park. And in regards to Miami, I think it could really be a toss-up between either of the McLaren drivers. 1 year ago, Lando Norris got his first win in Miami, so I'm sure he'll want to get his mojo back, and try to get one up on Oscar here and win in Miami for 2 straight years. But given how fast the McLaren is, I would not be surprised if Piastri able to challenge Norris for the win. But who really knows how Red Bull is going to perform? It really depends. But it seems like whenever everything is seeming to go wrong for Red Bull, Max Verstappen always seems to pull a rabbit out of his hat, and get the win.
I like the idea that Alex Palou, especially as good as he is, this is his first win. He could easily be the driver to win there, most likely, especially if he qualifies within the top 10. Somehow that team knows how to win almost from any position. Miami, I think I would lean toward Piastri being the favorite, but overall, Lando Norris is right there. He got the win here last year. He'll love to prove it, and let's just see what Max could do with that Red Bull car. If he can make it work, he'll make it work, put it on the pole, and potentially go for the win. But that's going to be a toss-up. I feel it's interesting just saying the IndyCar race. We're starting to anticipate one driver to be a more clear-cut favorite to win compared to Formula One, where that seems to be more of a toss-up. It hasn't been like that the last 2 years, 3 years really, with F1 and Max Verstappen and the dominance there from Red Bull. And of course, that busy race weekend next weekend right here on the Grid Network. Subscribe and hit the bell icon. Cody, let's go ahead with our one shiny moment.
Yeah, time for our Grid One shining moment from this racing weekend, and let us know down in the comment section below what's the one thing that stood out to you the most from this racing weekend, whether it was NASCAR Talladega, MotoGP Jerez, or World Rally Championship in the Canary Islands. And starting with you, Tanner, what's your one shining moment?
I'm going to shine my light on Xfinity Series driver Jesse Love. After last week's triumphant victory at Rockingham, where he clearly, put his foot to the floor and showed a lot of savvy, especially in the late race, and getting by Sammy Smith by moving him without wrecking him and allowing Sammy to, obviously finish the race. Well, unfortunately for Jesse, that elation soon turned to disaster, as it was determined that night that his number 2 Whelen Chevy Camaro was disqualified from the race for not being within rear suspension requirements, and they later lost the appeal this week. And while I know he did not go out and win this past Saturday in the Xfinity Series race at Talladega, he certainly put on a very strong showing that expressed to everybody that was watching that this kid's going to be special in this sport. And the way he was able to, keep making passes on the highest side of the track, like just nearly scraping the wall through turns 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, bobbing and weaving through traffic, it was spellbinding, frankly. And I think that him getting more cup starts, not only with RCR, but with Beard Motorsports through the rest of this season, is really just setting the stage for a potential move up to cup not too long from now. So if you don't really watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series at the moment, I'd recommend making sure that you do, because a lot of the future stars of the sport are actually down there, and 2 of them found themselves as part of the final action on Saturday, and unfortunately one of them got the bad end of it. But Jesse Love is going to be a star in this sport, and it's really starting to show now.
My shiny moment is going to come from the NASCAR Cup Series race today, and that's going to go to the 77 pit crew, Carson Hocevar's pit crew. What an effort by that pit crew today, because one of the big things, we saw how Josh Berry collided with that tire from the tire carrier, squeezed into the midsection hip area of that tire member. Clearly, there was some pain felt from that moment, but managed to continue on with the pit stop. Then later on, we saw that same pit crew for Carson Hocevar. They pitted behind all the Toyotas. The booth even said, I don't see why you're going to pit with the Toyotas, because at the end of the day, you're going to kind of behind them. You're all doing the same stop. They made that a little bit of a shorter pit stop to get ahead of them, put himself in a position to get a good, solid finish. And overall, that pit crew overcoming the moment of, hey, one of your pit crew members had contact with another car, discomfort, pain there. They still performed their job. What an effort by that pit crew. Carson Hocevar pit crew, that's my shining moment.
And my shining moment, I gotta give it to Kyle Larson for the week he's had. Going to Indianapolis, the open test, he got up to speed a lot more quickly than he did last year. It looked like he hasn't, spent many months, almost an entire year out of an Indy car. He fit right in and was looking really good, until he unfortunately hit the wall, which ended his open test early. But still, nothing to really worry about. Kind of like Kurt Busch did when he crashed. Right in practice before the Indy 500, I think it was a good thing that Larson was able to find the limit of the car there. And once he found the limit, I think it's going to make him even better once the month of May comes around. And I do believe that he'll be really quick, and he'll probably be, one of the contenders on race day. And then later on in the week, after crashing the open test, Kyle Larson went on to win the World of Outlaws sprint car race, continuing his dirt racing program, and then today end up getting a solid top 5 finish, on a super speedway, and we know Kyle Larson's luck on the super speedways over the years have not been good at all, and for him to go from crashing the Indy to winning the World of Outlaws race to getting a top 5 on a super speedway on a race you probably expect him to crash out or have bad luck. I think that was a pretty good week Kyle Larson had, besides the little crash at Indy. So in finishing the super speedway race, that's why he's by a great one shining moment.
And of course, tomorrow, Ben and Brandon, they're going to be sharing their shining moment on Grid Encore. Then we have Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. Women in Motorsports will be on the air, as well as our NASCAR race preview. And then, of course, we have Formula One, IndyCar, a busy weekend of racing. So be sure, hit the bell icon, subscribe. Don't miss any of our programs all next week, because we're going to have plenty of programming up. Then, of course, Grid Endurance, that's going to be updated week 5 for them on Wednesday. And the grid ranking will be posted up later tonight. And, of course, Matthew Bro's article is coming up, recapping the NASCAR race weekend at Talladega. Big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Marc, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can join them, invest in the Grid Network. We'll thank you on the air and, of course, read your name. And, of course, our Buy Me a Coffee YouTube chat leaderboard. We appreciate all the Buy Me a Coffee YouTube chats from this past month. We're coming up to the month of May at the end of the week. Of course, we're going to have special program for the Indianapolis 500. We got a lot of storylines with the Indy 500. Kyle Larson's doing the double. What's going to happen with F1, the Coca-Cola 600. Plenty of racing in the month of May. Don't miss it all right here on the Grid Network. For Tanner and Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful evening, and be sure to follow us on social media at Grid Network TV.